All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the stream. I hope everyone is doing well tonight. Penguin Operator, good to see you. How are you? So tonight we're gonna pick up where we kind of left off in the last stream. I did get a couple of things done since the last stream offline. We'll go over those, and I want to take just a kind of a quick step back and take a look at some of the things that we want to or that we need to accomplish before moving forward. Because one of the things that I don't want to do is I don't want to get stuck in sort of this editor mode for too much longer. We are going to be coming back to the editor multiple times, but I kind of don't want to get stuck here for all that long. So that is what we're going to take a look at tonight. But before I do, I want to take a quick second just to thank the supporters of the channel, beginning with our elite partner, Javier Alazaran, followed by our partners, Gabolis Inc. and Matt Oscard. Those are the highest tiers of subscription over on YouTube memberships and Patreon, followed by the list of supporters you see scrolling on the screen here. They are a combination of the other tiers of support over on YouTube memberships, Patreon, as well as Twitch subscriptions. So thank you all very much for that support. It helps me cover the costs of running the channel, things like software licenses, hosting fees, eventually assets, things of that nature. So I really greatly appreciate the support. Thank you very much for that. And in addition, I would be in large error if I did not say a big thank you to all of you guys, the viewers, whether you're joining us live on the YouTube side or the Twitch side. We do simulcast to both, or if you're catching the VOD after the fact. Without you guys, this channel would not exist and this project would not exist. So I just want to give a big thank you to all of you guys for hanging out with me, supporting the channel just by viewing and whatnot. So I appreciate you guys. All right, so I do want to just quickly kind of go over what we were looking at last time. So last time we were working on this chunk editor within the height field terrain editor. And specifically, we could basically go through here and select different chunks of terrain and remap the materials that it could use. And that was working fine. We had that all set up. What we didn't have last time was sort of a visual indicator as to what was actually selected. So if we take a look here, you can see this new orange box here, and that just indicates the chunk that we have selected. So it also helps, visually identify, what is selected, so that we can actually see, the area that we're going to be influencing with the actions that we take. And so that box is basically just the axis aligned bounding box that is surrounding that particular chunk of terrain. So you can kind of see how large the chunk of terrain here is, and so forth. So I went ahead and got that in there, and you'll see that obviously it grows along the y-axis for larger or taller chunks of terrain, and shrinks for ones that are relatively flat. So that is all good. That all makes sense. It's just a little bit of a visual thing. In fact, let me turn off some of the debug here. That'll make it a little bit clearer, probably, for you to see. And so as I select these different chunks, you can see here how the size of the bounding box varies, right? So that's that. Not a whole lot more else to discuss as far as that is concerned. The main thing that I wanted to talk about tonight was taking a look at the other portion of our texture browser. And that would be having the ability to open new texture files and import them, and some of the things that we need to get working in order to make that happen. So one of the things that we are going to need is we are going to need a way to interact with the OS to say, hey, I want to select a file that we want to import, or I should say a file or files, right? Because we could technically import more than one. And so for that, we're going to need what I'm going to call an open file dialog. It varies per platform. And if you have been paying attention to the repo, you'll note that I actually have already implemented the Linux and Win32 versions of those. It was a lot of really just trial and error experimentation to get those things working, and it was kind of a pain in the butt. So it wasn't really something that I wanted to cover on stream because I kind of needed to focus to do it. And we'll go over that code here in just a second. But for right now, I've got a test function in here in order to pop one of those open. It doesn't actually do anything other than open the box and report to us what we've selected. But that's plenty fine to start. So up here in the console, I could just do OFD for open file dialog. This is a temporary command that I added. Again, we'll go over the code for this. And when I click that, it comes up here with a folder full of individual files for us to import. Now, there's a couple things to note here, and a couple things that we are going to require for our cross-platform functionality. Three major things, really. So one is to be able to set the window title to indicate what we're selecting. Now, I have, obviously, up here, select some dang files, you dingus. That's just to tell me that that is actually assigning correctly at the OS level, right? And so this is Linux that I'm on at the moment. The next thing is to be able to indicate what file types should be available. So most platform file selectors have the ability to indicate the file type. So we've indicated just a few example ones here. So image files, BMP, JPEG, GIF, PNG. And then we have a second for all files, which gives us everything, which I think in this folder is irrelevant. But if we had like a target or something, I guess that would show up. And so we have that as well. And then also a starting directory, which in this case should probably be like assets images. For now, it's just kind of doing the same one that we opened the last time. So I still have a little work to do to get that to work. But if I come in here and I select, I don't know, let's just do 3 of them, right? I'll select these top 3 and click open. We can see here in our console window that we get a couple of bits of debug up here, but we also get a file selected list. So we have the 3 files that we've selected, complete with the full path to where those are on disk. And so what this will allow us to do is actually access the file on disk to do what we need to do, i.e. import it, and go from there. And the Windows version works very similar to this. I still have to figure out the Mac OS version of that. And so that will be something that I'll probably be doing offline as well, just because it can be kind of annoying, and I don't think it's really going to be good stream content, right? So that is essentially what the open file dialog is doing at the moment. We can go ahead and I think I'm done with this. I think we can go ahead and exit. All right, so we'll take a look at this from the perspective of the editor first, and then I'll go into the platform specifics. So if we take a look at editor C, I've basically registered a console command in here called OFD. This is just a temporary hack to give me a quick way to be able to access this, so I didn't have to add like a UI button with all that other stuff. This just allows me to very simply hook it up and make sure that all the events fire correctly and all that stuff. So the way that it works is we essentially have some options. So we have this structure that contains our options. And the reason I did this as a structure is because we may want to extend this at some point. But we have platform open file dialog options. So we can allow or disallow multi-select. So that's to be able to select more than one file. We obviously have the title here, which will vary depending on what we're selecting. So for example, if we are importing textures, we might say select image files. If we're importing models, we might say select model files, things of that nature, right? So that allows us at an application level to specify that. And then the filter. And the filter is a little bit, looks a little bit nebulous, but I promise it's actually a very simple string format that we have going on here. And the requirements of this vary per platform. So this is a format that I've come up with that's based loosely on the way that the very, very high level C# Windows controls work, because I actually thought that that was a decent way that they actually did it. And so the way that it's actually set up is we actually have, let me do a highlight here of the pipe character, right? So essentially the way that this works is we have a string that's delimited by pipes. And then we have two sets of data at a time that are provided within each of those pipes, right? So the first one is a description. So this whole thing is just a free text description. So the way that this is formatted does not actually matter. This is what displays in that drop-down box. And then the second element of this is a semicolon delimited list of extensions, right? So this is sort of the string tokens that we use to say, hey, these are the files that we wanted to include. So the fact that this text and this text line up is just pure coincidence. It's just, this is for a display saying, hey, these are the types of image file extensions we support. And then this is what is actually programmatically used. So we have one grouping here, which includes the description here and then the file formats here. And then we have a second grouping here, which is all files, right? So all files, we just have that description here, and then another pipe, and then a star.star, which basically means everything, okay? And so all of these options then get passed on to a function and are read by that function at the platform level and turned into the data that we need at that level. And we'll go over that in just a second. So the idea is that I don't want to have to come up with a separate list of these things or a separate format per platform. I want a clean interface that I can have work the same way across all of our platforms. And I only have to configure it here in the application code and then hand it over to the platform layer, and the platform layer just handles it from there. So we take this options and then we call a new platform function, which is platform open file dialog open. I know that's kind of a weird name, but it's the platform layer, open file dialog, and then open, right? I don't want to do create or anything like that because create kind of insinuates that we create it but don't necessarily open it. Whereas here we just kind of open it, right? I could say launch or something like that. I'm not sold on this name yet, but for now that's what we're going with. So all we have to do is pass the options to that, and that's it. And then it synchronously runs and returns a platform open file dialog result. And so essentially that contains whether or not success is true, which essentially means that the user selected a file, at least one file, and clicked OK. And then we have a file count and an array of character arrays or strings that are the file paths, right? So we have that, and from there, we essentially would use that data to perform whatever operations we need to. And I think, I think on a high level, this makes sense. We may wind up messing with the API just a little bit here and there and making small adjustments, but I think on a high level, I think this is going to make sense just fine. And so obviously here we just log some of that stuff to the console that you saw before. And then we go ahead and we clean up the result, which I probably am going to put a platform function to do that. Now, as I mentioned, this runs synchronously, which means, as you may or may not have seen, essentially, in fact, I will reopen this to demonstrate this. What that means is when we open the file dialog, let me blow this up and put debug off. All right, so I'll move the camera so that you can actually see the water animating, right? To just drill home my point, and also these numbers down here changing, right? When we open the file dialog, that is a synchronous operation, which means the application freezes until we're done here. And I thought about this back and forth because we could have like offloaded this to another thread and had the application still running behind the scenes, but then why, right? There's nothing really going on that makes it absolutely necessary for us to have the application running in the background, because this is something that we would only ever do from the editor. The end runtime application is never going to do anything like this, right? You wouldn't want to use this in that context. And so, you make your selection here, click open, and then bam, it catches up and continues running, right? So that's just kind of the way that works. I think it makes the most sense. It's the least error prone, and sometimes simplest is best. There's no reason to inject sort of all of the complexity that would come with sort of making this thing run separately or asynchronously from everything else. Singy, how's it going? Good to see you. How have you been? Let's see. Crispy Nugs is asking, what's a good source for learning C? Diminished, how are you doing, by the way? So, I have two answers to this. The resource that I used, which is what I used to recommend, and don't as much anymore, is Sam's Teach Yourself C. The reason I bring this up is because this is the resource that I use to learn the language. However, probably the better way to learn it, and I didn't know this at the time, is the C programming language, right? And so this one is by Brian Kernighan and Dennis Ritchie, right? This is the what's also known as K&R. It's the quintessential book for learning C. If you're going to learn C, absolutely use that book. You can use this one if you want, maybe as a supplementary thing, but I don't think it's needed anymore, and it's quite old at this point. Then again, so is the C programming language, but it has been updated, right? But the C programming language is a far better book. And so that is the one that I recommend these days. The Bibble, exactly. K&R, exactly. Jin Dango, first time chatter, by the way, welcome. Okay, so I hope all this open file dialog stuff makes sense. So, as I mentioned, I set this up for Windows and Linux. So I'm going to basically go over this very quickly for Linux because it's actually kind of long-winded and annoying, which is also the reason that I did not do it on stream. So here's the implementation for that function. We have in platform Linux C, we have that here. And here's where we fill out the result, right? So this same pattern is going to be followed across all platforms. So we fill out the result with sort of a default, and then if we hit the errors along the way, we basically return a false success with no file count and no file paths. And so this immediately looks into the state pointer for something called stbus_lib. And what that is, and what all of this other stuff is this is for the systemd bus, right? And this is right now, unfortunately, that means it only works in systemd. I'll have to re-implement this annoyingly for non-systemd implementations. But for right now, essentially, we have the library itself, which we load the shared library. So we deal sim that. And then we have a single flag here for the bus to loop, or to break out of that, rather. And then we have a bunch of function pointers. And the reason that we do it this way is because this implementation may not be available on all Linux systems. So we only want to attempt to execute this if the library actually exists and is installed, and we can successfully load up all these function pointers. If not, then we simply say it's not supported, for now, but we allow the application to continue running, right? We don't want to crash because of that. And then the other thing is we have a listing here of the open file dialog files temp, right? And so what that is basically a temporary storage bin that we use for selected files, because the way that this SD bus stuff works under the hood is asynchronous, kinda. So essentially what we do, startup is what I'm gonna look for. There we go. So essentially what we do is we come down here and we default our breakout of the SD bus loop to false. We'll come back to that in a second. We do a DL open against libsystemd, right? And if we find that, then we go ahead and load up all these function pointers. These are all various functions that we have to call for SD bus to actually get this thing to work. And then otherwise, if not, then for now we just throw an error and we say, hey, you know, we can't load this, we can't find it. Some platform functions such as browsing for files may not be available. And we will eventually enhance this to use other stuff that's out there as well. Anyway, so we get that, and then we go ahead and return. So if all of that is successful, then we have all these functions down here that we call and all these things that we need to set up. Now, this looks like a lot of code, and indeed it kind of is. But once I kind of walk you through the way that it works, it's not really all that crazy. It's just kind of verbose. So again, we just make sure every time we call open dialog, we want to sort of reset the state, right? So we make sure that the flag to kill the loop is set to false. We'll go into what that loop is here in a bit. And then we go ahead and we say, we reset some of these local variables, or not reset, but I guess set their initial state. And we essentially open up the bus here, and we say, if that failed, then boot out. And then here is where we actually call out into SD bus, and we say, hey, we actually need, from free desktop, we actually need the open file method, right? And so what this essentially does is underneath the hood, it basically says we need to set something up in order to call open file, which is going to give us our open file dialog. And so obviously there's lots of error checking and stuff that goes into that, and it's something we have to configure. But first thing is saying we need to actually get this first. Essentially, it kind of, you can think of it as a kind of almost loads a function pointer internally. Not quite, but it kind of sets a state saying, hey, this is the thing that we're going to be talking about going forward until we actually execute the thing. So the first thing that we do is we set the parent and title. So we don't have, we don't actually set the parent window for now. I don't think it's really needed. But what we do is we say, hey, if there was a title included with the options, use it. Otherwise, we just use open file as the window title. And we go ahead and we set that. So essentially what that means is we have this KSD bus message append. So this right here creates a new message that's saying, hey, it's a message that goes out to the system to do this thing called open file. And then the message that we're going to be appending is this M, which is this SD bus message, right? So we're saying to that we need to apply a property, which here, this basically just means we're going to add a string times 2, right? So string and string. This is the first string, which is the parent window, which we're not doing. So we're just saying empty for that. And then the title of the window here. And then we need to set up something called an options dictionary. And that's sort of what this means here. So we have string and then variant here. And so what that means is we basically say, okay, if we have multi-select enabled, which is just a Boolean, which allows us to select more than one file. Then we come in here and we say, hey, okay, we need to open a container that has a string and a variant in it. And so we append the string called multiple. This basically sets an option called multiple. So this is what sets it internally to say, hey, we want multiple selection. And then we open a variant container within that for a Boolean, and we set that to true. And then we close the container for the variant and close the dictionary entry, right? And so we only do this if we actually allow multi-selection. The starting directory is kind of similar. So again, we have a string and a variant for the dictionary entry. We do here current folder, so that's sort of the variable name that it looks like, for internally. And then in this case, we actually need a byte array, which is what this stands for. And so that byte array is actually the string and the path that we want to pass. And again, we close the variant and close the dictionary. And then for filters were the most annoying thing of all. So the filters, we essentially take that string that I talked about in the other file, which is over here, and we parse that guy down to, in this case, open file filter type data. So if we take a look at this definition, this includes a string for description, an extension count of the supported extensions that this uses, and then a array of strings of those extensions, right? So it basically takes this string and splits it out into the struct that we're going to need, so that we can actually iterate through them and add the properties onto our dbus message that we need. So in this case, again, if we have at least one type, then we're going to say, okay, we've got filters. If we don't have filters, the default mode is sort of all files. And so the first thing that we do is we say, okay, well, we need another dictionary entry. And again, a string and a variant. The string is going to be filters, and then the variant is actually going to be all of this crap, right? Which, suffice it to say, this is essentially an array of these things, right? And so we create that array here, right? And then for each of these types, we actually have to create a structure with an array in it with some additional information in that, right? So it's essentially an array of structures. So we iterate all of our types here. We open a new container saying we have our structure that we're going to be creating. Within that structure, we have a string that holds the description. And then we open a container for the array of strings, right? And that's going to be the array of extensions. So for each one of those, then we need to set up another struct container. And then we set u, which I forget exactly what the u is for, but it has to be 0. And then s, which is the extension, and then we close the container, right? So we essentially are saying, okay, we just need to iterate through this list. We create a dictionary of options. Within that, we have the types, which starts off with the description, and then an array of the individual file types, right? And then we just close those things and back out of the structure. And then all the way down here at the bottom, we do sdbus call, which passes the message that we built, takes in a pointer to hold an error if it happens, and then also stores a reply if we care about it, which we really don't in this case, but we do go ahead and read it anyways. So we read the return to object path, which is the only thing we're reading for it now, just to kind of verify that that it worked, right? And we spit that out just to the console for now. Probably in the future, we probably don't need to do this, but it's for my own testing and debugging purposes. And then here is where we actually listen for the response signal, right? So essentially when we call this guy, this is what begins that sort of asynchronous process to say, hey, here's a bunch of stuff, do something with it, right? And then dbus takes that and executes the code underneath the hood that eventually brings up the open file dialog, okay? And essentially, we then say we need to listen for a response for it, and when we get that response, we're going to call this onResponse function, which we'll go over in a minute. And then we have an event loop, right? So we could have, this is where I'm saying it's asynchronous kind of, right? Because we could have tied this into the global platform event loop, and that could have worked just fine. But I think for the simplicity of the way that the application works, I think it makes a lot more sense to just have this kind of do its own thing, right? And so what this basically does is it does a process of messages and then does a wait for half a second between iterations. So this is in nanoseconds, by the way. And then it checks to say, hey, have we set this kill SD bus loop flag? And if we have, we go ahead and break into this loop, right? So this continues to run, and this is what actually is kind of a spin lock, holds us in place until we've actually either hit selected a file and hit OK or hit cancel. And then we reset the flag here, and then here is where we actually go ahead and take the success based off of the file count and all that other stuff and spit out that and return the result. And of course, unreference the bus, right? So all of that, the only other piece of this is the onResponse. And so the onResponse kind of works a little bit in the opposite order, right? Where it just sort of, it reads in the response message, right? So essentially a 0 equals success, 1 equals cancel, right? So if the response is not 0, then we just say user canceled, set the kill loop flag, and then return 0. If, or otherwise I should say, it reads the results dictionary, right? So this is, again, kind of unpacking a structure of data, similar to how we packed it to actually fire off the dbus message initially. And so we go ahead and we create a D array to hold those entries, and then we essentially extract the entries out of that dictionary one at a time. We go ahead and extract the URI from that. And then let's see, did I actually sanitize? String duplicates. Yes, sort of. So the way that this works is it actually returns a URL or a URI to the resource, which is like what you might see for an HTTP resource or something online, except it uses file in this case. And that's fine, but that's not all that useful for dealing with things locally. So for now, what I'm doing is I'm basically just stripping the file off the front. We need to actually do proper decoding on that, which is what this is all about. But for right now, I just strip the file off the front and say, push that to our temporary array. And then we go ahead and exit that container. If that contains something aside from URIs, then we just skip it. And then all the way down here at the bottom, once we are done processing everything that was in the dictionary, we go ahead and also say kill the loop, right? And so it is a little bit synchronous or asynchronous, but I've forced it to sort of be synchronous. And that's how that works, right? It's kind of it's a lot. And it took me quite a lot to get that working. Let's see. Let me go ahead and catch up on chat. If I can give a suggestion too, I just picked up Learn C the Hard Way by Zed Shaw because it was recommended to me. You know what? I am going to, like the Zed Shaw that streams Zed Shaw, like that Zed Shaw. Huh, interesting. Okay, cool. I will add that to my to-do list to read. I'll check it out. I use Python, but I want to learn C low-level understanding. That's fair enough. I mean, we get a lot of folks in here that start with higher level languages and want to learn the low-level stuff, and I think that's awesome. The great thing about learning something like C is it will make every other programming language you learn ever make a whole hell of a lot more sense. Recently switched to one of the BSD flavors because Linux is too mainstream, I guess. And my project didn't compile, so that's fun. Oh, that is, yeah. I actually want to support BSD at some point, but, and actually, I've been thinking, because I've been on Arch for 4 years, by the way. Yeah, I think 4 years. And I'm actually considering switching to Fedora. Just because I'm tired of crap breaking all the time. And I say all the time, it's only realistically broken like 4 times, so it's like once per year, right? I don't know, just as something different too. Because I've done the Ubuntu thing, I've done Arch now for a while. So I'm kind of considering switching to Fedora for a bit. Plus Torvalds uses it, so can't be all that bad, right? So yeah, we'll see where I wind up on that, if I wind up actually doing it or not. We shall see. Let's see. Let's see. I'm actually finally working on my Vulkan engine tonight, too, for the first time in months. Awesome. Glad to hear that. I started it following along with your engine series years ago. Going to be adding rich text to my UI tonight. Nice. Rich text is one of those things that's a to-do for me. So yeah, that's super awesome. I'm waiting on doing rich text because I want to implement signed distance fields for font rendering, because that'll help immensely with rich text. That's the primary reason I haven't done it yet. Yeah, that's super cool though. Also, I don't know if I'm going to need rich text for my game, but there's that. All right. So I think that's all the stuff that I need to go over for open file dialog. I suppose I could do the Win32 version of it too. This one is quite a bit shorter. I can fit it all on one screen. This literally just uses get open file name W. So like on Windows, it was way easier. I didn't have to do all that. There are other more complicated ways doing it through COM and stuff like that, and I investigated that too. But it required that I make like an application manifest and all that stuff to use all the newfangled UI, all the newfangled like UI stuff that they have with,
You dingus.
Whoa, large raid. Jonathan Blow with a raiding party of 282. Thank you so much for the raid. Welcome, raiders. Thank you, Jonathan, for the raid. I really appreciate that. How are you doing tonight? What'd you get up to on your stream? Welcome. We are in the middle of doing nasty like cross-platform crap, dealing with open file dialogues, because I hate myself apparently. Do I watch said streams? I do on occasion, yes. Yeah, welcome raiders. So I will just do my quick spiel here to let you guys know what we're working on. So we are building the Kohi game engine, and it is built in C using Vulkan as our initial rendering backend. And I say initial rendering backend because I have plans to support DirectX and Metal as well. But for now, Vulkan is the one that we're using. And this is sort of a resource that I'm creating that I wish that I had when I was learning how to do this stuff. It's basically a way to create a game engine. It's not the only way to create a game engine. It's not even always the right way to create a game engine. It basically is just, we do a lot of trial and error, experimentation, things like that. Try to see what works, what doesn't, and do a deep dive into that stuff along the way. The engine itself is open source and free. It's on GitHub. It's Apache 2.0 licensed, so that basically means if you want to use it for commercial or independent, does not matter. Personal projects does not matter. All that I ask is that if you use it, just say you used it. The idea is that I'm hoping to sort of inspire folks to want to get into making the tech behind games instead of just blindly using things like Unreal, Unity, or Godot. And so that's kind of what we're doing here. And then I'm building a game on top of that. So the engine itself is very early days. There's not a whole heck of a lot to show off. I guess I could bring it up really quickly, but there's it's not what I would call production ready yet. And so I've got the ability to sort of run around and do a sword swing animation and jump and stuff like that. But essentially everything that we've built here has been pretty much completely from scratch. Thank you guys for the follow. Appreciate that. So to date, we've got basically just a basic PBR pipeline rendering here. I can actually turn some of the debug stuff off so you guys can see that a little bit clearer. So we recently added the terrain, which I need to fix the shadow maps because those are kind of terrible at the moment. But we have the ability to now edit terrain, so I can actually come in here and paint my terrain. So we recently got that working, as well as the ability to come in here and modify elevation, things like that. We're working on basically filling out our editor with all of the various tools that we're going to need. We also have, I recently put in a texture editor, and this is kind of, I should say, a texture browser. And this is sort of the precursor to what we're working on now, which is the ability to import textures and other assets without having to do it in script or sort of by editing files manually. So we're working on that. And then we have the ability to, select entities and move them around and, just the generic stuff that you might expect from an editor. All of that said, we also have a couple of debug rendering modes, if that makes sense. So we've got, lighting only, normals, cascading shadow maps, and then of course wireframe, which I have to turn these off to make that look a little bit better. And then yeah, so that's there we go. Yeah. All right. So yeah, that's pretty much what we're doing. And the game that I'm making is called Shadows of Illumina. It is a 3D isometric action RPG. That is, and I say isometric with air quotes because it's not true isometric. It's just kind of an isometric-like camera perspective. Although it will have bespoke camera angles along the way as well. Cool. So let me see if I can catch up on all the messages here. Do I use IMGUI? No. So the UI system I've written is completely from scratch as well. Everything that we've done, there's only a couple things that we haven't written completely from scratch, and most of that is under our tooling. And so if we take a look at, let's go here. So our importers for our various asset types is an externalized tool set. So right now these just run on the command line to import audio files, images, models through ASEMP, right? So ASEMP is one of the things that I'm using. And then for libraries. There's ASIMP, there's STB Vorbis, STB Image, and then Mini MP3, which I'm probably going to remove that at some point because I don't know that I want MP3 support going forward, but it's there. But basically, all these things are externalized into our tool chain so that it's not included in the runtime. So all those things get converted all to our bespoke formats, and that is what the engine actually uses. So I hope all of that makes sense. I know that was a huge information dump, but I hope that makes sense. Fancy? I don't know about that yet, but just notice Arch, by the way. Yeah, I named my machine Arch, by the way, for the memes. Ironically, I'm going to be switching away from Arch, I think, at some point. But yeah. Instantly recognize that Win32. Yeah. Yeah, so we were talking about open file dialogues right before the raid, and I went over the nasty dbus version of that for Linux, and I was just kind of showing, like, you know, hey, Windows is actually not that complicated. Windows gets a lot of things wrong, but like some of their APIs are actually pretty relatively easy to use sometimes. Let's see. Okay. I think I caught up on chat. So yeah, thank you again. Did I do a shout out? I don't know if I did. Shout out to Jonathan Blow. If you guys aren't following him, he just released his game, Order of the Sinking Star, not too long ago, and it's fantastic, honestly. He's the guy that wrote his own programming language to write his own game engine in, to then write his own game engine on top of it. So yeah, very impressive stuff to say the least. Sorry, announced, not released. Yes, wrong word there. But yes, it's very impressive looking. I've watched lots of the interviews that have been out there, where he's sort of gone into the development tools and stuff like that, and showing off bits of the game, and it's very, very impressive. Let's see. Thank you for the Twitch Prime. I appreciate that. Thank you. All right. Will always be too much of a casual to use NeoVim. I like my VS Code and IntelliJ. No, that's fair enough. I mean, I still use it for debugging because I have to debug cross-platform. And this is the only one out there that is consistent in experience across Windows, Linux, and macOS. So it's not good, but it's the one that's the best out there that's consistent across the three. Is there any reason you use C over any other language? Yes. I prefer the simplicity of the language. For years, I wrote C++ that was like very C-like, and I called it C++ Lite. But when I stopped and thought about it, I was like, you know, I'm not using most of the features that C++ has. You know, and I was trying to get away from OOP at the time and all of that stuff. And I'm like, you know, I think it just makes more sense. Like, if I'm programming this close to C anyways, when I started this project, I said, you know what, I'm gonna try writing this in C, and if it doesn't work, I'll go back to C++. And I just never wound up doing it. So, yeah, it was an experiment at the time, but I'm glad I made the switch and I haven't looked back. Never thought of Meta as audio caffeine before, but I like it. Yeah. I'm a huge fan of that expression. Ryan needs to deliver Rad Debugger for this man soon. I don't think he's porting it to Mac OS though, is he? Because that's the reason I haven't switched to it, is I don't have it on Linux, and I don't think it's going to be on Mac OS. Does C have const expression now? I think they were talking about. I want to say they were talking about it, but I don't know that it's actually out. I haven't looked, to be honest. So what you see here is C99 with C11 features sprinkled in one or two places. if you would invest your time in learning a game engine, I mean, one of the commercial ones out there, Unity, Unreal, Godot, which one would you choose in terms of future opportunities and not just indie game dev stuff? In terms of opportunities, I can only say this from my perspective, so huge asterisk with this. But most of what I have seen in terms of job opportunities that I've either gotten emailed about or that I've seen on job postings have been Unreal as of late. Take that for what you will. I don't know that I would personally do it, but if I had to make a decision between the three, that's probably the one. Just checking, are you deliberately pronouncing it Godot as opposed to Godot? Godot just feels weird to me, but is it Godot? See, that's the thing. I don't know. So I just pronounce it the dumb way, I guess. Frankly. What C11 features do you use? So, oh wait, I think it's in the header file. I use, actually, is it in this file? Yeah, there it is. Type of, for one thing. And that is for my dynamic arrays. So that I have a way to perform this function. But this is like one of the only places that I actually do it. Most of the time I avoid stuff like this, but for dynamic arrays, it was nice to have sort of a relatively type-safe dynamic array that I could use. And since C doesn't really give you a way to do that, this is kind of the way that I hacked it together. So there's this, and I think there was one other thing. Maybe it was it might have been, yeah, if I have my custom memory allocator turned off, in order to use aligned alloc, I have to use C11. That's what it was. That was the other thing. But I think other than that, that's it. So at some point, I'm going to be like eliminating those as, I'm going to be eliminating those out of the code base so that I don't have to even have C11 as a requirement. So I could just say C99. Color scheme junkie here is this. This looks a little bit like jelly beans. It's actually based off of the, let me pull it up real quick. The old Adwaita theme. So, let's see. It is in, just gotta find it in my repositories real fast. Here we go. Okay. So here, I'll drop the link to it. So basically what this is there's this Adwaita NVim theme by this guy. But he made a update to it after the large sort of main versus master tree sitter change thing that happened a couple years ago. And he made a whole bunch of actual other changes to it that completely changed the way the theme looked. So what I did was I forked it and went back to the old way that the theme used to look, which he said was wrong, but I actually liked better. So I just kind of made my own and went from there. And that's what this is based around. I believe there's a macro feature I'm using from C11 that is in C99, some obscure type from some lib I don't remember. It's for debugging. That sounds about right. That's the only kind of thing that I have in here. Like, aside from the dynamic array thing, that's pretty much it. Static assert from C. Oh, that was the other thing. I forgot about that. I think I do have that in here. Yeah. I do have that in here too. But, I mean, that's something that I could also theoretically eliminate as well. Makes such a good impression that it makes me think about ditching my DirectX 11 game engine and go full Linux, OpenGL, and C. I mean, well, okay, so I don't know if I would do that, though. I don't know if it would be worth doing that, because with Proton and stuff, like DirectX runs quickly on Linux these days through DXVK. So I don't know that it would be worth like redoing it, unless you had like unless you have kind of like the architecture that I have here, which basically has a plugin architecture for things like your renderer backend and your audio backend, where you could just kind of swap them out on the fly. Then it might make sense, but if you're kind of in the Windows ecosystem, it might just make sense to stick with that and just say, hey, Linux support runs through Proton. I don't know. I mean, it's a lot of work. I'll put it that way. Oh, and the other thing I should point out too, and this may actually be a deal breaker for you, is this is another thing I have to address, is we have... That's okay. I thought it was more than that. It's only about 2,300 lines of code, but this is X11 only for my Linux layer. This is not Wayland. So if anybody's using Wayland, which ironically I am right now, it all goes through X Wayland. So I figured I should point that out too. I need to make a Wayland backend as well. So just remember that if you do a Linux backend, you have to deal with that as well at some point. Static can be done in C99, but C11 felt like a better implementation, so I kept it. I don't remember. Is this available in C99? Maybe it is. Well, via extensions, I guess. Maybe? I don't remember. It's been too long. I wrote this a while ago when I started the engine, so I honestly don't remember. How long have you been working on the engine? So, 5 years, but asterisk. 5 years of less than part-time hours per week. So I can only put in around 10, maybe 15 hours on this a week, because I do work a full-time job. So if you extrapolate that out, we're really looking at about a year. I would say a year of development time. And I say a year because there's been like streaming, the overhead of streaming, explaining things, interacting with chat. That takes time too. So I would say it's realistically, like if you were doing this in full-time hours, it's about a year of development. It's a different thing. Static assert is C11. C99 option is called something else, but it's essentially the same thing. I just think it has more arguments. Yeah, I don't remember off the top of my head. This is one of the first things that I wrote in the engine, actually. So it's kind of like one of those you write it and then forget about it things. So yeah, this might be like if I were to switch to C99, it might bleat about that. I'm not 100% sure. I think it has more arguments. Maybe. Well, I mean, C99 static assert. Introduced as, okay, this is C11. Okay, yeah. I mean, this is almost identical to what I actually have. So, let's see. Oh, okay. I mean, there are ways of doing it without it, though. So, yeah. All right. So where was I? I think we were looking at open file dialogues. So I had just put in, I have the Win32 implementation done. I have the Linux implementation done. And so when I go here to the editor and I open up a console and do open file dialog, I can get that, select files, open them, and get them here. So I need to hook this up to a way to actually get that data from there to my texture browser. Well, actually, it's not even really to the texture browser so much as there's actually one step I have to do in between that, which would be I need to run the import process against them, which is external tooling. So I'll have to spin up a process for that, fire that off, wait for the response, and then create a new asset manifest entry, add that there, and then refresh this, which should then read from the updated asset manifest, and we should be good. So a few things that we need to do. Okay, so the asset manifest this is what I was talking about when I said we had like a manual file that we kind of have to edit. And so what this is we have multiple packages. We have, with the core engine itself, we have several different, what I'll loosely call modules, not as in like C++ modules, but modules of code, you can think of it, or shared objects. And so runtime is one of those things, and some of these can actually come with assets. So the runtime comes with some fonts, some images, and some shaders. And each one of these also has an asset manifest of its own. And then the application itself also has assets, which is where all the game assets exist. And then, of course, it has its own asset manifest as well. And then asset manifests can reference other asset manifests. So we're looking at the Shadows of Illumina package here, the manifest for that. And it references the runtime package, the Kohi UI package, and the utils package, right? So this is for the editor, this is for the UI system, and then this is just for runtime. It comes with a few default material. I think it's materials and a couple of other like our shaders, our standard shaders, things like that. And so from that, we then have our listing of assets, and this is what we would be ideally changing. So I think when it comes to importing assets, when we go to import any asset of any kind, the only type of import that we should allow via the UI is into the game package. We don't want to import into like the runtime package because that is going to be read-only by the time it's distributed to the user. So game package only is going to be the one that is going to be edited. So within that, obviously we have, and just to finish up the explanation here, so each one of these things is an asset. It comes with a name, obviously. So when we go to load an asset in the engine, this is how it's actually referenced, is by name. And then the type of asset is here. That is used by the asset system to filter based on asset type if we want. We can have metadata that has other extraneous fields in it that are kind of ignored for right now, but eventually those will be stored as well if we want. This description is also ignored when we load it in. It's just kind of there. And then the two important bits are path and source path. So path is to the sort of imported or final asset. So in this case, it's a KBI file, which is a Kohi binary image. And so this is to the path to that file on disk. And then the source path is obviously the source asset that came from. So we take this JPEG and we write it out to this KBI file. And the reason that we have this here is for the purpose of importing. But also we can set up hot reloading for this. So we can say, I want to watch this source asset, and if it changes, reload. So we have the ability to set that up. And then, and we are actually doing that for things like shaders. And then the other thing, let's see. The other thing is there are some asset types that don't have a source path because they're not actually imported. So for example, our materials do not have that, right? They just have a path because the KMT is just a Kohi material, right? So, you know, it looks something like this, right? It's pretty straightforward stuff. So the idea is that when we do an import, we will essentially modify this file. And then what will become of this in the final release build, when we actually package up a release build, is we'll have a process that runs against this file and takes all of the assets that are in here and creates a lookup table of their names, and then basically crams them all into one huge binary blob. So we'll have a lookup table of essentially name and then offset. And then from there, we can load the metadata or load the raw asset data and just slam that into memory and we're good. And so while this version of it actually references stuff on disk, the final version of it will actually have just an offset in bytes and will not actually have this stuff unless we choose to maintain it for like metadata purposes. All right. So, I guess the first thing that we need to do is we need to actually set up our asset manifest to be writable, because right now I think it is only readable. So let's do kpackage, which is what holds the asset manifest. And within that, let's see. So we have our two entry points: create from manifest, which is it creates it from this file, and then create from binary, that loads it from binary off disk. There's the destroy, and then here is a bunch of our queries. So let's see. We do have the ability to write an asset, but we don't actually have the ability to add an asset. So when we add an asset, we essentially need to add one of these entries. So we will need the name, the type, the path, and potentially a source path. I think it's going to be acceptable to just reuse this structure. I don't think we need to create a new structure for this. So let's go in here to, let's see. These are all kind of queries. Let's actually just go to the bottom here, and I'll do a, we'll say KAPI, and I'll do a return type of Boolean just because it's possible this could fail. And I'll say kpackage add asset to manifest. No, that seems wrong. I guess I could just do add asset. So kpackage package, and then I guess I could just take a asset manifest asset. That seems kind of, I don't know that I like that, but let's roll with it for now. So we're basically going to say add asset, and then we also need a way to, whenever we add an asset this way, do we want to automatically write the file, or should that be a separate function. Because I feel like whenever we add the asset, we should probably also be updating this file. So I guess we'll just put a note here. Outputs the asset manifest file. Right? I guess that makes sense. All right. So the first thing that I think we're going to have to do is we actually need to add. We need to add it to our asset manifest. When we do, oh, that's going to be the tricky part though. We don't want to allow this actually in release builds. Now I think about it. Because our release packages are going to be read-only. So I'm going to have to actually do I'm going to have to do that because yeah, I guess that makes sense. All right. And I'll have to do the same thing, I guess, internally as well. All right. Okay, so when we create from manifest, we actually do we actually throw out the manifest? I don't remember if we actually do that or not. We have these asset entries. Oh, we're going to have to write a serialization routine for this, I think. Okay. So actually what we're going to have to do is we'll have to add it to this internal list, right? So we have this internal data entries. So we'll have to add it there. But then we'll have to also say we want to create a new asset manifest from the given K package and then write that to disk. Okay. Not the end of the world, but a little bit more than I thought I was going to have to do tonight. Okay, so let me just note this down. So to do, we need to add to internal asset list for the package. We need to create an asset manifest struct from the package. We need to serialize it and then write it to disk. And then only once we get there can we return. Okay. All right, so let's do the first bit of this. I'm actually just going to move this here. So we're going to do package, internal data, entries. Was that a D array? I forget. It is. Okay. All right, so that'll be pretty easy, actually. In fact, I'm just going to do this. I'm just going to copy pasta this. All right, so new entry. Let's update this to be a little bit easier to read, shall we? All right. Oops. Okay, so new entry. We're going to go with the name, the type, the path, and then the source path is also going to be that. And the reason that I'm doing a string duplicate there is because I don't know what the life cycle of this thing is going to be. More than likely, it's going to be created kind of on the fly in our UI code based off of what's returned from the open file dialog. And so I don't want to have to worry about the life cycle of those strings. I'd rather just duplicate them because the entry in here when it's added to... Oh, I see what I did here. That's not necessary anymore because string duplicate actually checks for that. Okay, allocate. All right, I don't think I need to do this. I think I can literally just do that. And we've pushed the asset to it. So that's pretty straightforward, I think. The thing that I'll have to do now, and actually do the entries, these do actually store, they do store the type, okay. So we're gonna have to create an asset manifest. We're essentially gonna have to redo or do the opposite of this. Do we actually store? I don't think we store reference information in here, do we? Parse file content. So we do parse it, but do we actually... We store it in the manifest, but I don't think the manifest actually ever... I don't think we ever actually wound up using the references within the package itself. So we're going to have to store that, unfortunately, because otherwise we're not going to know what to write out here. So we need to store... We need to store that, and then we can go ahead and put all this back together. Okay, so let's do that. When we do... When we do this, we have, let's see, the references are, what do the references contain in code? I forgot. So we have asset manifest reference. We might be able to just use, we can actually just use this structure. Yeah, let's do that. So we'll go ahead and just say references. Okay. So I guess when we do, we'll do assets first, and then we'll do, actually, no, I guess it makes more sense to do out package, internal data, references. Oh. Do I want the ability to create these on the fly? We might want that. All right, I'm going to go ahead and do a D-array for this. So we have asset, manifest, reference. And then we'll just go ahead and do instead of asset counts, we'll do ref count, references, ref counts. And then I suppose I could just create this the old-fashioned way, but then I have to manage all that stuff in line, which I really don't want to do. So I guess we'll do D-array push if I can spell. We'll push two references and we'll say manifest references sub I. That's not going to totally work though, because that's only going to shallow copy the strings. So we're going to need to do a string copy on that as well, which is annoying, for the path. The K-name is fine, but the path is not fine. Okay, so I guess we could do out package, internal data, references, sub I equals string duplicates, manifest references. Oops, did I do? That should be references sub I path. Forgot the path over here. There we go. Okay. So we need a deep copy of the string as well. And then we'll have this available when we go ahead to write the manifest. Okay, so we need to create the manifest struct from the package. So we'll do asset manifest. I guess we'll just call it manifest. It's fine. So path. Ooh. We don't store that either, do we? Okay, I'll just put a to-do for right now. Get stored path. That's actually like a fix me. All right, so references. References, I think for this one, I'll just go ahead and do a shallow copy of this. So I'll do package, internal references. Oops. Wait. Null floating from disk. Oh, right. I need to store that as well. Okay, so fix me get stored file path. Wow. Dyslexia hitting me hardcore tonight. Okay, so name is just going to be package name. And then finally, the assets. We're going to have to do a C array, asset, manifest, asset. And the count is going to be the array length of package internal data. And I realize I'm coding behind my head there. Internal data entries. Entries. Okay. And then obviously we have to loop through those. So U32I boomer loop. I suppose I should probably save this off so that I don't have to query it twice. Right, so we can say asset counts and then asset counts. Okay, so for each one of these, I want to do I'm going to take a convenience pointer, I think, just to make my life a little bit easier. So package, internal data, entries, Oh, wait. This needs to be manifest assets sub I. And then, what was this? I think it's just asset entry. Yeah, asset entry. Entry. Jesus, I can't spell tonight. All right. So that is going to wind up being package internal data entries sub I. All right. So I think it literally should just be entry name, a path. I think I'm going to do a shallow copy of this as well. We have path and source path. So that way I don't have to go back and delete all of those strings. Because all we're going to write it right here and then throw this structure out. So entry path, and then source path is equal to entry source path, and then type is equal to, whoops, entry type. Forgot the equals there somehow. Okay. And that should be it as far as this. So the next thing is going to be to serialize it. And I don't remember. I think we did the serialization in here. Yeah, which is kind of annoying. But I don't see the point in externalizing it either. Because this is really the only thing that needs to know how to parse that file. So, I guess what we do is we essentially just recreate this property for property based off of this structure here. And again, I don't think I'm going to bother externalizing it, because I don't think there's anywhere else that needs to actually use this format. So, let's do a all right. So this tree is essentially what holds all of these individual properties. So now we can just do a case and object property. We want to add a string. So we want the tree roots. The name is going to be package name. And I realize I'm coding behind my head again. There we go. Sorry about that. And the value is going to wind up being manifest name. Wait a minute. Yeah. So that actually needs to be string. Don't we have a... I thought we had something in here for a K-name. Or do I have to actually get that? Add K-name as string. I thought so. For some reason this is just not... There it is. Okay. Okay, so we have package name, and then we have references. So we need references is going to be case and array. And we're going to call this refs. Did I get that right? Yeah. This should probably also be KSON object create. All right. So to this, we're essentially going to loop through the references and add things to this refs, and then add the refs to the root, right? So we'll do here a, I should probably do we have a ref count anywhere? Did we actually do that? I don't think we did. No. Okay. So U32 ref counts equals the array length. And we want, I guess we could do package internal data references. And then we can U32 boomer loop this. So I is less than ref count plus I. And for each one of these, we need a KSON object. And we're going to call this ref obj. So KSON object creates. And then to that, we add properties. So we do KSON object value add string. That might have to be a kname as a string. We'll see. So we want to add this to the ref object. The thing here is just going to be called name, and then the value is going to wind up being, I guess, manifest references sub I. Whoops, sub I. It is a kname. Okay, so we're going to have to add a kname as string. In case you're wondering what the heck a kname is, by the way, a kname is basically a hashed string. It's a case insensitive string. So we basically take the string, convert it to lowercase, hash it, store it in a lookup table, and then we use that 64-bit hash to do a comparison. So it's just integer comparison. So anytime we do any kind of string comparison throughout the system, we're not doing actual string comparisons. We're actually just comparing integers. And then the reason we store it in a lookup table is so we can get the original string back if we need it for any reason. So when we do an add kname as string, this actually goes and says, hey, I have this kname, what's the original string for it? And it uses that to actually write this out. Okay, so we have name, and then path I think is actually going to be a string. Object value add string. So we want ref object, and then this is just path, and then the value is going to be manifest references sub I path, right? And then we do a KSON array add object, and the array that we're going to add to is going to be refs, and the value is just going to be ref object. Right, so that adds this to this KSON array. KSON, by the way, in case you haven't figured it out, is the file format that we're looking at here, right? We did that as sort of an example of like how to write your own storage format. So it's similar to JSON, but it's got some simpler rules and some different ways that the data is actually handled, and allows us to have our own types easily converted to and from strings while we're reading it and so forth. All right, so that's the references. The assets are basically going to be the same thing. Thank you guys for the follow, by the way. Appreciate that. So, before we do that, though, we need to say KSON object add object, right? So we are going to say the tree root. To that, we are going to add, what is it, references. This is going to be what the property is called. And then we're going to add refs to that. And actually, that should be add array, not object. Even though technically speaking, they're kind of the same thing under the hood. But it does make a difference in whether it outputs these guys or these guys. Okay, so the only other bit is going to be the assets, and that's going to be pretty straightforward as well. So I'm actually just going to do something very similar here. So case an object, or no, case an array rather. And this is going to be called assets, I guess. Case an array creates. And we already have the asset count, so I can actually just do, I'm actually just going to copy this real quick. Save ourselves a little bit of time. So this is going to be asset count. This is going to be asset object. All right, so each one of these is going to have a name. So we're going to have, instead of manifest references, we're going to have manifest assets. Right, and the name for that is also a K-name, I believe. Yes. And then same thing here. So assets. The path for that, I believe, is a string. Yep. And then we need the source path. So source path. And then we need the type, which I don't recall if we actually have a function that does that correctly or not. So I'm just going to we're going to add another string, and I'm going to call this type, and I'm going to set this to type for a second, but that's obviously going to bleat about that because that's an enumeration, not a string. Because I want to change this stuff before I forget. So assets, and we add asset object, and then here we say assets again, and assets. So this is all that's really required for us to serialize that. Not really a huge deal. Asset type, or is it string from assets? I thought we had a string from, or is it asset type to string? Yeah, we do have it. Okay. K asset type to string. That's why it wasn't showing up. Okay, so type string equals K asset type to string. And so this is actually going to wind up being this guy here. Oops. And we want to use type string here. Okay. That is our serialization complete. So that's done. And the last thing we're going to want to do is write it to disk. And I'm not going to do that right now because I want to test all of this to make sure that it works properly first. So probably what we're going to do is we're going to put in a hack. And we're just going to spit out the actual serialized string, which actually I just realized there's one more thing I have to do. We created the case and tree, but we did not actually serialize it. So case and tree to string, and we pass tree, and that returns a serialized string. That is what we're going to just do a K trace here. And so I'm actually just going to do a new line and then output that. Because what we're actually going to want to do is we're going to want to write this directly to a file, right? So it should output a string that looks a lot like this, although it's probably going to nuke some of these other properties that we're not really saving off right now, but I think that's fine. These were just kind of experimental, like when we were figuring out the file format. And then one last thing, so we don't leak anything, I want to do a KSON tree cleanup. Right, and that'll basically clean up all this stuff that we did. So we do all of this to build out the object structure that, I should say that the struct structure, or the struct tree, if you will, that then goes and is used to generate this. Okay, so with that, kpackage add asset, I guess what we could do really quickly this is going to do it for every single asset though. Okay, yeah, we really should split this out now that you think about it, because if we add multiple assets at once, it's kind of dumb to do it this way. So we'll push the asset to it, and then we'll say fix me separate this. Okay. So I think this is probably a good spot for us to leave off for right now, because I do have work early in the morning that I need to get up for. And this will be a good place for us to pick up on stream tomorrow, I think. So I think that's going to work. Let's see. Will you integrate Lua as a scripting language? No. At least not into the engine core. So if I ever wind up doing a scripting language, which I don't think I'm going to, I certainly don't need it for the game I'm working on, because I've got C hot reloading. If I were ever to do that, it would likely be as a plugin. So the plugins are optional in terms of their use, and the application can choose whether to use them or not. So things like our UI system or the utils library, those things are plugins. And so the application can use them or not. If you don't want to use the UI system, it's not part of the core engine, you don't have to use it. We only have one audio plugin and one renderer plugin right now, but the application could choose between multiples of these when we get those in as well. So if I were to put a scripting language in, it would be as a plugin, and it would not be part of the core or required to build or any of that stuff, because those tend to be pretty heavy. They tend to also be a huge vector for bugs, and generally just not worth it for most cases, especially if you're just working on something yourself. All right, let me find a channel to raid. And while I do, I just want to give a big thank you again to John for the raid. I really, really do appreciate it. And if you haven't followed me already, I would really greatly appreciate a follow, either on the Twitch side or the YouTube side if you're so inclined. Both. I am trying to grow my channel and trying to hopefully get more people into doing this kind of thing. So I definitely thank you for that. I definitely appreciate each and every one of them. Follows, that is. Okay, I think I actually see who I'm going to raid, because he was actually talked about earlier in the stream. Well, maybe. Do you guys want to see Go game dev? I don't know, I feel like that is not really too on par with what we're doing here. Followed you a long time ago, but Twitch said no. What do you mean it said no? That's funny. Let me see if I can find something that is kind of closer related to what we're doing. Zed Shaw is streaming at the moment, but he's doing stuff in Go, which is not the end of the world. I just don't know how I feel about that, I guess. To each their own. I just don't know anything about it. I don't know if you guys would find that interesting or not. I think, though, that's probably the direction I'm going to go, unless I find something that is more closely related to what we're doing. Just bear with me just a second here while I find a channel. Have a bunch of channels I've followed, but for some reason Twitch drops them after some time. I have no idea why it happens. That's really weird. I hope that's not like a normal thing. Or it doesn't register them. Oh, that's weird. That is very weird. I hope that's not a thing that happens. That would suck. Building a follower base is hard enough as it is without something like that, for sure. All right. Let's raid Zed Shaw. Actually, I'm seeing C++ on his screen right now, so maybe his title is just wrong. Or wait. No, that is Go. Or it's both? Okay, well, I guess we'll see what he's up to. All right. Well, anyways, thank you guys so much for joining me here. I really appreciate it. Had a lot of fun tonight. Pretty productive night, all things considered. And we'll be back tomorrow night for hopefully the completion of this import stuff. But anyways, yeah, I will see you guys in the next one. Have a good one. See ya.